When everything becomes cheap enough to win, there's no winner left. For years, people looked at China's rise and said, "This won't stop." For a while, they were right. The place they called the world's factory was built on such relentless efficiency that even watching it stirred a strange admiration. There were cities that never slept, assembly lines spinning bright even through the night shifts. As for prices, they dropped another notch every year. This wasn't an ordinary decline, it was the kind that continued until Western competitors abandoned the field altogether. Scale, discipline, and planning had come together to create a system that converted raw human labor directly into economic power. But miracles don't come free. They never did. China's greatest advantage, the ability to produce everything cheaper, faster, and at greater scale, eventually turned into the very thing that choked it. Money, power, and history collide right here. And let me say this up front. Nothing in this story is as simple as it looks. If you look at the core of what China is going through, you see modern capitalism stretched to its absolute limits. A system that says grow no matter what. Don't stop, even if the cost is burning your own future. So what happens when the world's largest economy optimizes itself to the point of exhaustion? What if efficiency starts eating itself past a certain point? To find the answer, you have to go back to the very beginning. In 1978, Deng Xiaoping stood before the Communist Party and toppled perhaps the most untouchable taboo of socialism. He told China plainly, "Getting rich is not something to be ashamed of, it's patriotism." That single sentence ignited one of the fastest economic transformations history has ever seen. Nearly all the peasants turned into entrepreneurs overnight. Fields turned into factories. First, the Japanese looked, then the Americans, then the Europeans. They all saw the same thing: cheap labor, an inexhaustible human resource, a government ready to do business with anyone who knocked on its door. China started by opening a few special economic zones. Think of them as small experimental cities where the rules work differently. No central planning, no bureaucratic dead ends, no ideological exams. Just one goal: attract capital, generate exports. The system worked spectacularly. Shenzhen was a sleepy fishing town of 30,000 people. In short order, it became a metropolis of millions. Within 20 years, the formula had spread to every corner of the country. Every province chased its own boom. Every city dreamed of becoming the next Shenzhen. Local governments borrowed money, built highways, erected power plants, established industrial parks, all with the same purpose: attract more factories. By the early 2000s, China wasn't just growing anymore. It was swallowing the world's demand wholesale. Steel, coal, copper, oil, you name it. Most Western companies that wanted to survive moved their production there. Whatever could be manufactured would sooner or later end up being made in China. But as time passed, something dangerous was ticking away underneath. Success had been reduced to a single thing: be cheaper than everyone else. Local governments slashed land prices, kept taxes at rock bottom, and suppressed wages just to land factories. Companies did the same. They melted their margins, cut quality, sacrificed profit. Everyone was chasing growth. Nobody was asking about sustainability. They called it progress, but what was really happening was a race to the bottom. For a while, none of that mattered because the machine was too powerful. Workers flooded in from the countryside like a river. Every year, millions of people were willing to work 12 hours a day for a tenth of Western wages. The factories never stopped. The ports ran day and night. Western consumers lived their own little miracle in the meantime. A t-shirt for $5, a phone for $300, inflation-free abundance. China got rich. The West got its fill of cheap goods. Everyone was happy. At least that's how it looked. Then at some point, somewhere between the 10th gleaming shopping mall and the 100th steel mill, the machine started to crack. Without anyone noticing, the miracle had turned into an addiction. Local governments had entered a vicious cycle. They had borrowed to build factories. They needed growth to pay back those debts. And to grow, What did they do? They built more factories. By 2015, China's steel capacity alone had surpassed the rest of the world combined. Industrial zones were producing far faster than global demand could absorb. Prices started falling, but not because of innovation, because of desperation. When profits evaporated, factories didn't slow down, they sped up. They thought volume would make up for the losses. It didn't. Around that time, a new concept entered circulation. It was actually a word borrowed from human life, but it now described an economic reality: involution, an inward collapse. Involution isn't just people struggling harder for less in return. It's companies producing more for less profit. It's competition shifting from who makes the better product to who can endure losses the longest. The word used to be reserved for Chinese students and workers. It described the state of exhausting yourself for shrinking rewards. Not anymore. Now, it's an industrial, systemic phenomenon. Entire sectors are locked in a zero-sum war for market share with price as the only weapon left. Solar panels, electric vehicles, batteries. All the showcase products of China's new economy have turned into battlefronts. Dozens of firms, most of them state-backed, flooded the market with near-identical products. Everyone tried to undercut the next one by just a sliver. Margins evaporated, but nobody could stop. In a system where production equals legitimacy, cutting output means losing face, and so the cycle feeds itself. A company slashes prices, a competitor matches it, profits collapse, wages freeze. Consumers are happy for a while, sure, until they realize the bill for cheap abundance is being deducted from their own prosperity. China has entered the age of industrial involution, a vicious cycle where efficiency devours profit and production devours purpose. The question is no longer who produces better, but who can carry losses longer. As with every race to the bottom, nobody wins at the finish line. The numbers are plain to see. China's solar panels are selling below cost. Electric vehicles are filling up parking lots, waiting for buyers. Tech giants are strangling each other in the same shrinking domestic market, even as their valuations melt away. Despite record exports, industrial profits fell by more than 20% in 2024. The reason is actually simple. When everyone enters the race to be the cheapest, only one thing is left that can fall the price itself. This isn't capitalism in turbo mode. It's capitalism eating itself. The tragicomic part is that China had seen this film before. In the 2000s, when overproduction in coal and steel drove prices into the ground, Beijing intervened hard. It shut down mines, forcibly merged factories, and put hundreds of thousands of workers out on the street. It was a painful triage, but there was no other way. It accepted short-term pain to prevent total collapse. 20 years later, the same scenario is back on stage, with one difference. This time, the problem isn't confined to a single sector. The problem itself is the entire growth model. Factories don't close because the numbers don't add up. They close when politics allows it. And China's politics never rewards contraction. It rewards motion, even if that motion is just going in circles. Party officials behind closed doors see the picture clearly: melting profits, frozen wages, swelling debt. But what they say to the outside never changes. Produce, grow, believe. Because if the machine stops, so does the illusion. By the time we reach the 2020s, the efficiency machine has morphed into something else entirely: an economy competing against itself. Anyone looking from the outside still sees a picture of triumph. Record exports, new factories, production lines large enough to power continents. But behind the curtain, profit margins are collapsing. The miracle is no longer generating new wealth. It's recycling what already exists, slicing it thinner and spinning it faster with each passing year. Economists call this overcapacity. In China, overcapacity isn't a malfunction, it's a policy choice. Let me give you an example. Look at the solar sector. In 2023 alone, China produced more than twice the world's total demand for panels. Prices eroded by nearly 40% in a single year. Companies sold below cost just to burn through inventory. Dozens of small firms went under. The big ones kept producing because local governments needed the jobs, the numbers, the appearance of progress. The picture in electric vehicles is even more striking. Over 100 Chinese brands are competing in the same shrinking domestic market. Every one of them is slashing prices. The others are forced to follow. The government hands out subsidies to prevent mass layoffs, but the subsidies don't break the cycle. They feed it. More supply, lower prices, thinner margins. You don't need to be an economist to see where this is heading. In the first half of 2024, industrial profits fell by more than 20%, while exports were running strong. Factories are operating at their highest volumes in history, yet earning a fraction of what they used to from each unit. The economy is still growing in the official numbers, but the substance of that growth is hollowing out. Now let's get to the part you might not expect. None of this is entirely accidental. A significant portion of it is by design. The Chinese government has long since mastered what you might call weaponized efficiency. It uses subsidies to keep strategic sectors alive long enough to suffocate their global competitors. Quarterly profit reports are irrelevant here. The objective is to build strategic monopoly. In solar panels, batteries, and electric vehicles, Beijing doesn't worry about short-term losses. It wants control of the future. Local governments pour billions into factories, cheap loans, and tax breaks so that companies can sell below cost. This isn't a survival strategy. It's a competitor elimination strategy. The logic is cold. Flood the market, undercut everyone. Wait. Western competitors bound to their shareholders and quarterly earnings expectations can't withstand this pace. They fall one by one. Once the global supply chain becomes dependent on Chinese production, China can do what monopolies have always done: pull prices up, set its own rules, sit atop the value chain. This playbook isn't new either. China did the same thing in steel, in rare earth metals, in shipbuilding. Every time it held prices at the bottom until the world realized it had no other option left. But this time, the scale is different. These aren't old-style industrial commodities. Lithium batteries, photovoltaic cells, electric powertrains. The circulatory system of the 21st century economy. On paper, it's genius. In practice, it's fragile. Even strategically, there's a limit to how long a system can keep walking while bleeding money. Once that threshold is crossed, the structure starts to rot quietly from within. When every sector gets accustomed to expecting the state to cover its losses, efficiency turns into dependency. Companies start competing not on innovation, but on who can capture more subsidies. Productivity drifts into politics. The line between national strategy and national burden blurs. This is the real danger behind China's price wars. These aren't ordinary trade disputes. They're fiscal time bombs. Every penny spent keeping factories running today is stolen from tomorrow's stability. Sooner or later, someone will have to pay that bill. And that's exactly what makes this version of the China trap so painful. The strategy that once enabled it to conquer world markets is now eating its own economy from the inside. Dominance built on losses doesn't count as victory. It's a deferred collapse. What finishes off empires isn't the collapse of demand. It's the collapse of purpose. And here, purpose has been replaced by momentum. The system can't afford to slow down because every layer of it is dependent on motion. Local governments are dependent on factories running to roll over their debts. State banks are dependent on those factories continuing to borrow to keep their balance sheets intact. The central government is dependent on all of them working to maintain the appearance of full employment. If a single link in this chain snaps, the rest follows. That's why everyone, even knowing it's no longer true, keeps saying more production means more prosperity. This is the political logic of state capitalism in its purest form. Production is treated as proof of control. When growth slows, the state doesn't step back. It builds another factory. When prices fall, it pushes them even lower. When the private sector hesitates, local governments step in with more credit. The prescription for every imbalance is another dose of the same imbalance. It sounds insane, maybe, but it's not irrational. It's a survival reflex. Because China's economy isn't just a wealth-generating machine. It's a legitimacy-generating machine. The social contract has a single clause: keep growing, and the people will keep believing. As long as growth brought rising incomes, that deal held rock solid. When growth gets reduced to merely producing cheaper goods, it starts to crack. The paradox is cruel. China's massive overproduction suppresses inflation worldwide, looks like a good thing. But the same mechanism crushes its own wages and domestic demand. The country that lifted hundreds of millions out of poverty is now struggling to push those same people's living standards one more step higher. History repeats itself, but only those who study it can see what's coming next. At Financial Historian Academy, we decode the financial secrets hidden within history, searching for tomorrow's crises in the pages of the past. If this video gave you a new perspective, subscribe and hit the bell because you don't want to miss the next lesson.